all, and welcome to episode 484 of the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week, along with some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos and friends, we bring you movie reviews from films either current or classic, all, of course, with a lovable bear twist. We're excited to be back with you folks for another exciting
All right.
Another exciting episode. Yeah, false start.
False start.
Hey, Will, before we restart, is
Yeah.
it Jamie or Jaime Reyes?
Jaime.
That's Jaime.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or Jaime, yeah.
That's what I thought, but I didn't want to. Yeah, I know. Sorry.
I'm back. Okay.
Well,
okay, so there goes my theory.
Right at the beginning.
There goes my theory that it's somehow Wi-Fi related. All right. I don't know what's up. Cool. I'm going to rewind and do it again. Hello, all, and welcome to episode 484 of the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos and friends to review films either current or classic. Of course, with a lovable bear twist, bear perspective, bear hugs, all the bear things that we like to do on the show while we talk about one of our favorite things, that, of course, being movies. And this week, we've got a big one for you. It is the newest outing from DC's movie studios. Whether this franchise, entry will continue in the new DCU, TBD, it sounds like. But we're going to be reviewing Blue Beetle on its own merits as its own thing, regardless of where it fits in the greater plan for the new DCU. We're going to be talking through our thoughts, and we'd love to hear yours too. So if you're listening live, jump into that live chat. Let us know your thoughts on Blue Beetle as we're talking about it. And if you're listening through the magic of digital tape delay, maybe you're on the treadmill, maybe you're in the car, maybe you're eating a donut at your favorite donut place while listening to the podcast, we'd still love to hear from you too. Find us on Twitter. Yeah, I'm not going to say the other name. It's Twitter at MB Podcast, or on Facebook. Just look for Movie Bears Podcast. Find the discussion thread for the episode. You'll be able to find it easily because it's video of our mugs talking and reviewing the film. Let us know what you thought. Jim is with us. Thank goodness he is, because, babe, we wouldn't be able to do this show without you. How are you doing? Welcome.
Oh, thanks. I don't know about that, but it's really nice that you said it. Thank you. I'm doing pretty good. We're still watching movies and getting some, I guess, summer-like movies. That's good. This might be one of the last of them, right, that's going to come out this year, because we are now very soon entering September. Kids are back. Some kids are back in school. Kids are going back to school. To me, that means the end of summer and kind of the end of summer movies. The one we're going to talk about today might be kind of toward the end of summer, but I'm excited to talk about it with you guys. So I'm here and ready.
Well, jazzed to have you with us for this review of Blue Beetle. Someone else we absolutely are glad to have with us as well, is William Lindis. Hey, Will, welcome. How are you?
Hey, Brad. Hey, Jim. I'm great. We always have a blast doing this show. Whether it be summer blockbuster time, whether it be spooky season, whether it be prestige season, whether it be kind of dump season at the beginning of the year, whatever it happens to be, we find great ways of talking about film. This one hits at a good time for me. We're talking about a comic book inspired or comic book themed movie. I've been kind of in my personal life just in sort of a huge comic book renaissance for myself the last few months. And in fact, I'm even, bringing for show and tell today an appropriately themed comic book for the people that can see it. Great. The people that can't, it's an issue of Blue Beetle that they gave as a promo at my comic book shop for the movie. But so I'm excited to talk about this one. I'm really excited to sort of scratch this itch. Not that Not that it's hard to scratch this itch nowadays at the movies. There's a new comic book movie every 3 weeks, it seems, but still, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to talk about this one.
Well, we're happy that you're here as well. Well, thanks so much for joining us. So, bigger discussions are happening about DC's slate of superhero powered films. We had the Snyderverse, that was a thing for a while. James Gunn took over the DC arm of films. We don't necessarily know what the new plans are going to be. If Blue Beetle will continue. It sounds like there's a possibility that he may stick around, whether it's the version from this movie or a different version played by the same actor, who the fuck knows. But we are going to be assessing this movie, as mentioned earlier, as its own standalone thing on its own merits. And I guess we'll see where this ends up fitting into things, at some point when official word comes down. But if you're not familiar with the format of our show, we're going to talk about this film spoiler free for about 10 minutes or so. We'll give you our initial impressions, what we thought is this we're seeing while it's in theaters, maybe waiting to stream it or even skip it entirely. And then we'll give you fair warning before we kick things into spoiler territory, at which point you'll listen at your own peril. But Jim, Will, I've gotten all the spoiler plate warning stuff out of the way. Are you gentlemen ready to dive into this one?
Yeah. So, wait, you want to know if this movie crawled up inside of our minds or hearts, or is there something really bugging us about this movie? Is that what you're asking?
Brad, Jim, let's initiate podcast review protocols.
And this is why I say, babe, I literally couldn't do the show without you. And Will, you bring so much because that was way more fun than anything I could have done as an introduction. Thank you for helping us to three-hand this one. Combining our powers always leads to good things. So, yeah. All right. Here we go. Our discussion of Blue Beetle. All right. Jim has volunteered to kick this discussion off on this episode. So, babe, give us a little bit of a setup. What the hell is this movie, and what were your initial thoughts?
Well, yeah, you had mentioned right up front that this is another entry in the DC extended universe, right, of comic book movies. I read that this is the 14th installment in the DC extended universe. Kind of crazy, right? We think about Marvel and its massive extended universe, its massive MCU, but we've already got 14 movies in the DC extended universe. And they range from pretty good to not so good. And this movie I knew nothing about going into Blue Beetle. I didn't know anything about Blue Beetle as a superhero from comics because, as I've mentioned before, I'm not really a comics reader. So my first introduction to this was through the trailer for the film when it came out. And I got to be honest, trailer didn't do a thing for me. Like I saw this trailer and I'm like, oh God, here we go again. It looks very generic, just with a blue, give me a movie with a superhero movie with, a blue filter over it, and it'll be the same thing. But in the end, this one won me over. I did kind of enjoy this movie, and we'll get to those reasons why. But I did kind of enjoy this movie. I enjoyed it quite a bit, in fact, way more than I thought I would based on the trailer. So the trailer didn't do this one any justice. This movie is. Let me read the IMDb IMDb description before we get too far. An alien scarab chooses college graduate Jaime Reyes to be its symbiotic host, bestowing the teenager with a suit of armor that's capable of extraordinary and unpredictable powers, forever changing his destiny as he becomes the superhero known as Blue Beetle. So there you go. That's kind of the movie in a nutshell. It's directed by Angel Manuel Soto, who I don't really know from other. We can probably look him up from other um, properties. It stars, and I'm gonna mess up this name maybe, but it's either Zolo or Jolo Mariduena is his name, and we know this actor from the Karate Kid series, the rebooted Karate Kid that's out. He plays um, one of our favorite characters in that show, and he's the star here. And I gotta say, he does a really, really great job. That's one of the main reasons why I like this movie. I think they picked the right, kind of the right person for this role. This is a person who, yeah, he's known kind of in this TV world. He wasn't really a big star, so his name isn't going to drag down the character. Also, I just think he's a really fresh face. He's got a great charisma on screen as this character. I think he's great. His name is Jolo Mariduena. I think that's how you pronounce the name. And he plays the character of Jaime Reyes. I liked pretty much most of this cast. Believe it or not, some of the ones I didn't like were maybe some of the more well-known names, especially in this movie. You have George Lopez in this movie. He's in a lot of films. He plays the uncle to Jaime in this film, and while there are some beats between them that I thought worked, a lot of the comedy stuff that they tried to layer on just seemed to just kind of hit the wrong note a little bit for me. But I want to keep it positive a little bit. There's a lot that we can probably knock on this movie, but I want to talk about what worked. And I talked about the one who plays Jaime Reyes, Jolo Mariduena. He was great. This movie isn't going to break any. Isn't going to break any new ground in superhero movies. It just doesn't. It follows pretty much a lot of the same tropes and A to B to C to D. So there's not a ton of surprises. We might get into a few when we get into spoilers, because there were some things it did that I really liked. And we can't talk about them here, but we can talk about them in spoilers. I like the other thing that really I liked besides the main character and actor who portrayed him was the family dynamic here. They did a lot of things with the family dynamic that I really liked, and it worked for me. And in a kind of a strange way, I liked the relationship between him and his sister, him and his mom, him and his grandmother. All of that really worked for me, and his dad in this film as well. So yeah, I'm gonna give this film a thumbs up. I surprisingly, it won me over in the end. Like I said, it's not gonna, it's not a mind-blowing masterpiece that breaks new ground. But I think what it does pretty well and enough to be entertaining. And when we were watching it in the theater, we were watching it in a pretty full theater. It was pretty early in its opening weekend, and here in Tucson. This movie obviously brings out kind of the Latino aspect into the superhero genre, right? And I think that's really good. I think this movie does a lot in terms of its inclusion, and diversity, and it, for me, it worked in this film. And I could say our audience in Tucson ate this film up. Like, people were laughing, going crazy for this movie, which I kind of hadn't. It's refreshing to see in a movie theater now. So, yep, Blue Beetle gets a thumbs up from me.
All right, excellent. Well, Jim, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Matthew in the live chat says hello. Hey, Matthew, welcome. Glad to see you.
Hey, Matthew.
All right. Well, Will, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on this one. Did this work as well for you as it did for Jim? Did it hit maybe a little differently? Where'd you come down?
Yeah, so first of all, my background with the character is honestly next to nil. So I want to kind of put that on the table. This character was introduced in 2006 in the DC Comics. the Jaime Reyes character. Before that, Blue Beetle that I remember growing up was Ted Cord, who Ted Cord, Blue Beetle, and Booster Gold. And so while the Jaime Reyes character has been in the comics since, I've just not really read much of those. In fact, I think most of my exposure to this character has been from the DC animated movies, like he was in Teen Titans Judas Contract, if you watch that. Coming into this, I didn't know much about this character. I didn't know much aside from the trailer and, just some of the major beats. He was going to be in kind of like an alien themed robot suit fighting baddies. That's kind of what I knew coming into this one. And I think I'm like Jim. The trailers did not really do much for me, and there are definitely some elements, especially in some of the CGI, that just didn't fully work for me. But I'll forgive rough CGI if the story and the characters click for me. And I think by and large they did, because this story sort of leaned into being sort of a wacky, campy family film. About how these characters like need each other and bounce off of one another, and that I think you can squeeze a lot of mileage out of. Director on this, Angel Manuel Soto. He's actually Fantastic Fest alumni. He did a film back in 2015 called The Farm, which is really good, and a movie called Charm City Kings that I think I talked about in one of our plug sections here a few years ago. It's really good. So I was excited to see him do this. Definitely not the type of film he's used to doing, but that's what happens here. I think the biggest either compliment or insult that I can give this movie, depending on where you fall on the list, this is the DC movie that most feels like a Marvel movie. From the casting of Zolo, in that exact sweet spot that you mentioned, Jim, of known enough to where people go, "Oh yeah, it's that guy," but not so known that it sort of like overpowers the character. From the inclusion of comedy, from the arc itself of the character, kind of focusing character first, superheroic secondary, obviously weaving all of those things together. That's especially a lot of like what those like phase 1 or phase 2 Marvel movies did very well. So good, bad, whatever. That's something that you can expect here. Yeah, I mean, this is not going to light your world on fire. But I think that this felt like a breath of fresh air compared to some of the other DC movies that I've seen. There's been a lot that just have not clicked for me. They work better for other people, and that's super cool. But just this felt like it was allowing itself to have more fun, and I'm okay with that. Just we'll talk more in the spoilers about kind of the biggie stuff there. But this movie has an aesthetic. This movie has a feel. It has a soundtrack that matches that aesthetic and feel. I don't know. It's fun. Again, it's a solid. This is a solid 3.5 out of 5. For me all day. It's nothing really to like really get too down on, but nothing that makes me say like you gotta like break the bank and immediately go see this right now. But yeah, I liked it.
All right, excellent. Well, Will, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts as well. Seems like you definitely found some things to enjoy here, which is always a good thing, when it comes to going out to the movies. Jim, seems kind of like a similar experience for you. I do, unfortunately, have to maybe come down a little less positive than the two of you did on this film. But I'll start with some things that I liked. Really strong, meaningful family dynamics on display, which is definitely a good thing. Core, strong family definitely helps you plug into the character and care about. Yeah, yep, exactly. Also, some really great representation here. I love seeing people in my social media feeds crow about how this movie made them feel seen and made them feel included. And, I think that's a fantastic thing. And Jim, to your point about seeing this with a pretty packed house here in Tucson, we have quite a large Latinx community here in Tucson. A lot of Mexican Americans, and we certainly saw a lot of that representation in the crowd, and people were literally cheering for Jaime and his journey. So I think it's empowering for people. I think it's very meaningful, even if you're not necessarily part of that specific community. I think it's great to see that representation happening. And Zolo, really love him on Cobra Kai. I think he did fantastic here. I'm definitely questioning, what's going to happen with him and Blue Beetle going forward in James Gunn's new DCU. Um, TBD again on that, but we'll see what happens. There are a few things I want to talk about in spoilers that I thought were especially impactful in terms of social messaging. But just a couple other notes I want to give. A really hot chubby bear
Oh
scientist
yeah.
in this film. Very, very nice to see.
Yes.
Um, and I also have to give this movie some credit for having some real consequences happen as a result of poor decisions on the hero's behalf, and not shying away from those consequences, really sticking with them and having those be impactful and meaningful. So some really good things there for sure. Now for some of the things that I think didn't quite work for me. Unfortunately, the George Lopez comedy just completely. Matthew in the chat says a lot of cringe. Matthew, I don't know what specifically that's in reference to, and feel free to elaborate if you like. But for me, every moment of the George Lopez comedy was just pure cringe. I'm weird when it comes to comedy anyway, though. You guys know that. So, George Lopez comedy isn't for me. I accept that. But as an aspect of the film, I think it's fair to say it just didn't work for me. All the yelling and the screaming and the just nuttiness and zaniness of the family, just everybody cranked up to 128,000%, was just too much for me. I think the family stuff worked most when it had a few like lighthearted, sarcastic back and forth moments, when the family is dealing, with trauma and some of the things that are happening, as a result of this journey that Jaime is on. I think that works really well. But I just think a lot of the antics, the zany stuff that's happening was just too much for me. Matthew says, I'm sorry to say that the grandmother was cringe as well. I like the grandmother. I think she's a cool character. But like completely agree, Matthew, for sure. I also gotta say I was kind of let down by the suit. I think the main part of the suit looked really cool. They did a good job with like the lighting and it looked cool. But the fucking rubbery insectoid arms that like come out of his back and like wave around and jiggle like while
It
he's
felt like
talking to
foamy
people.
kind of things.
It just felt like 1960s bad sci-fi movies with like, or like old Star Trek episodes. I love the original series, but those fucking alien rubber suits, man, like cheap as hell. And we have fucking technology for this now. And to take it even a step further, they spend all this money on like fucking flying vehicles and Jaime's suit and transformations and cool weapons, and those things are great. But there's a fucking scene, it's an establishing shot with goddamn flamingos that look like they're from a PlayStation 2 game. And I'm like, you really couldn't pull like a little bit more of that money back to like make your flamingos look good? Or, use live
Not even use them.
flamingos. I don't know. So, just from a visual standpoint, that was a little bit of a detractor from me. Will, you mentioned the soundtrack, and that's interesting. There's some needle drops here that I do think work well, but the score of this film is very synthy. It reminds me a lot of Blade Runner, and I think that the crazy like crank to 100,000% antics don't really match with like the somber synthy Blade Runner-y feel, and so it felt very dissonant to me. And so I don't think the score worked very well. I actually want to see the Blue Beetle movie that matches the synthy somber actiony score. So I don't know. I think overall, this movie has a lot of cool things going for it. This would not be a recommend to see in theaters for me. I don't think it was that great. I didn't enjoy it that much. If you are a huge, superhero movie aficionado, though, absolutely, this is probably something you should go see while you can see it on a giant screen with good sound. But honestly, this kind of felt like a made-for-TV movie to me, about a superhero, and I don't know, just didn't work very well. So I'd say wait for streaming, maybe catch it when it's on TBS even someday. So there you go.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to follow up a little bit on what you said, and what Matthew said about the grandmother was cringe as well. I'm wondering in myself if that's almost more of like a cultural nod. Within Latin families, I think the grandmother or nana, whatever, in these close families, who often lives with the rest of the family, you know, has a certain status, like there are certain things around that person in a lot of families. I hear about this a lot, like, people talking about grandmothers and families like this. So yes, was it over the top and it didn't need to be? Absolutely. There were some parts where like, ooh, like turn that down from 12 to like 9 and I might, it might have worked really well. But they leaned on it like more than once too. There was a few times they went to that well, and by like the second and third time you're like, okay, we get it. She's, I won't say it's kind of a spoiler to talk about it, but say that. And the other thing is, you know, the score, you mentioned the score, and yes, it was noticeable that it was very synthy, like you said. But to be honest, I kind of, while it may not be the best match and may sound dissonant, I kind of give the movie a little credit for trying something different than the usual soaring strings, and it's going to sound like every other fucking like orchestrated superhero movie score. You know what I mean? Like they all kind of blend together after a while. And at least this movie tried something different. Okay, it may not work for everybody, but I gave them credit because I did notice it, and I'm like, ooh, it's interesting. It's, at least they're trying something. And for me, what maybe, I don't know. Sometimes discordant stuff can like call attention to itself and kind of work in a way. It's really weird like that. Not that I would go out and buy this soundtrack because it like didn't do anything for me that way, but in terms of the way it kind of stood out, I give it a little bit of credit.
Well, just to clarify, I think the soundtrack is fine. There were some great needle drops.
I'm sorry.
There was some really cool. Yeah. I just want to be clear that it was the score that felt dissonant from the film to me.
Yeah. And for me, I think I'm kind of with you, Jim, on that. Like, I think what worked so well about it for me is that it did feel like it was giving some additional life to some of the scenes, right? It was giving something kind of fun, something interesting, something moody at times. And I like that quite a bit. Going to the grandmother point. There's sort of two sides to that coin, right? Because they're going for a generational story, which I think is an important part of that. But at the same time, I personally have kind of a weird bias against like, anytime a movie has like the granny or the grampy who like suddenly becomes like cool or whatever, right? Like who has like and I say that because the trailers sort of drop that. So I know that scene's in the trailer without giving too much away. But I think they could have just sort of like, I would have been much kind of cooler with if that character, if she was just sort of like a slightly like, I don't know, mouthy badass, like before like the action kicks in, so that it's not quite as like big a turn. Last thing before, I know we got spoilers soon, but I do want to really double back to the Harvey Guillen point. He's the one that plays Dr. Sanchez in this. One of the great like gay chub bear actors of our current generation. He's been doing killer things on What You Do in Shadows. He was Perito in Puss in Boots. He is a Crazy Ex-Girlfriend he's been in. He was a major role in The Magicians. I mean, he's been really rising to prominence. And to the point where I keep seeing him like getting like in addition to walk-on roles and things, but also like voice acting roles and stuff randomly and stuff. He shows up in Strays. And so I think there's a reason why this character resonates so well for us, and it's because he's one of us, right?
Did he is?
Oh
Like this, I didn't
no,
know. I mean, I just assumed he was a character actor, and I never, with somebody I don't know, like or know of very well. I don't try to. Well,
100%.
I always hope a certain way, but I don't pretend to like. But if he is, then all the better. I like him even more. Maybe I should have given another quarter star.
Yeah, absolutely. No, he's actually friends with a friend of mine. So it's one of those like, every so often they'll be like, I'm at this and we got a picture type thing. But whatever, that's like gay bear world, how that works. But either way, it's still good to see one of us in roles and not just like, the one role where you get to play like it's great when you see like a queer actor play like a queer role in a show because it's sort of like great representation. But when we see a character who's just sort of dropped into things because he's a legitimately charming, witty, funny, and actually he's got to get the singing voice. He gets to do some sort of like singing in like that Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist show. So the fact that this dude is like an absolute renaissance man, and he's getting to play a variety of roles in a lot of like mainstream things, like it does feel like I don't know, this probably sounds weird, but like it sounds like a win for all of us in some ways, which not to claim any of his like stuff, but it's just like it seeing someone like us on screen doing well feels good.
Yeah, it does, and I'll be watching for him now that I know a little bit more about him. Thanks, Will.
All right. Well, fellas, how do you feel about making that jump into spoiler territory so we can talk a little more freely?
Yes.
Let's do it.
All right. So listen up. If you continue to listen, you do so at your own peril because spoilers for Blue Beetle are about to officially begin. If you have not yet seen the movie and you value your ignorance about the plot of the film, this is your chance to step away for the next 10 or 15 minutes or so. Then come on back for plugs. You're not going to want to miss those. If you're listening through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc., Jim has put an anchored time index in the show notes for you. You can literally tap the timestamps. Go ahead, skip forward to plugs, and then
after
you've seen Blue Beetle, go ahead and come back and listen to the spoiler section of the show. But Jim, Will, where do y'all want to start? Spoilers are fair game.
I'll just to touch on this again. I know we probably beat it up a little bit too much, but the grandmother thing, at a certain point in the movie, she all of a sudden becomes a badass. She picks up this weapon that is like as big as she is, and she starts, "I'll get those motherfuckers," or whatever she's saying, and she comes out and she wipes out a bunch of bad guys. I got to say that, as much as Brad's eyes and my eyes rolled back in our heads when some of that stuff was happening, people behind us were going bananas. Like they were going crazy. We talked about the audience cheering, and I'm like, okay, maybe they have a Nana in their family. You know what I mean? That they kind of project her as being this type of badass, in a situation like this. Who knows? I don't know. But, yeah, I just thought that was fun. Sometimes watching a movie, you have more fun listening to the audience reaction than you get from the actual film. And there were moments in this film that were like that for me.
What else I'd like to call out as being a pretty darn good performer is, and I'm looking up her name real quick, Belisa Escobedo.
The sister?
Yes.
The sister, Milagro.
Milagro.
Yes.
Definitely one of those roles that, so she's the sassy sister in this, right? And
yes.
I think sometimes, again, that's the type of character that can really quickly go from like, oh, this character is entertaining and steal scenes to being, I don't know, grating. And I think that this actress did a really good job of always staying on the correct line of it. I think in a lot of ways, I think she was maybe one of the most talented in the cast of sort of finding exactly the sweet spot of when to be wild, when to be dramatic, when to be moody, when to be kind of like slapsticky. Like I think she had a really good control of everything. And part of it's I think that character was especially well written and she had the kind of the best material to work with, but I think also the performer got it. So yeah, I really like
Yeah. Which was really, if you think about it, so there's a bit of there's a comedy track in this film that works pretty well, right? The sister's relationship with mostly with her brother Jaime, right? I really love that relationship, that back and forth, most of it. So you didn't need the over the top George Lopez crazy uncle angle as much. You know what I mean? It seemed like, I don't know. It just seemed like a little bit too much. I would have been happy with just, just the a little bit more Milagro and less George Lopez.
Yeah, I will say that at least for me, the element that I was least looking forward to going in is George Lopez because he's just not a comedian that I normally connect with. I think I ended up probably on the higher side of him than it sounds like the two of you were. I do think there was a little much, and like it definitely feels like one of those like, well, we got Lopez, let's give him more lines type thing. That said, the fact that he got to play kind of a, I don't know, like conspiracy theorist. I felt like kind of like conspiracy theorist stoner, like weird uncle type guy. I think let his eccentricity like fly a little bit better. Because that's sort of what you'd expect from that type of character, regardless of who's delivering it. Maybe could have cut back on it a little bit. I definitely agree there, but there are definitely timelines where the material that they've given that specific actor would have been way worse for me.
I think for me, it's just the comedy is just way too over the top in general in this film for me, and that's a personal taste. But it just the movie makes some weird choices with how it inserts the George Lopez comedy. At one point in the movie, we're in spoilers. This is all good. Jaime's dad fucking has a heart attack and dies, and literally 2 minutes later, George Lopez is in his truck getting shot at, wisecracking and going, "Ah!" And like it just feels, I don't know, like a real disservice to like the heavy emotional moment of what just happened with the dad and that consequence to what's happening with Jaime and what's going on with him. I don't know if they were trying to use that as like a, hey, we took you to a sad place, but like let's take you away from it.
Right away.
I get wanting to manage the emotions and take the audience on an emotional journey too, but I don't know, man. Like it gave me fucking whiplash.
It's okay. Yeah, you're right. It's
whiplash.
okay to let an emotion simmer, right? Like when I think about that emotional whiplash, I think back to do you remember in the of all things the Bambi movie where like right after spoilers Bambi's mother dies and then it immediately like smash cuts to just like flowers and like animals like jumping around along happily and there's sort of that same whiplash and it's supposed to be sort of like destruction to renewal yada 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 but at the same time you're like what the fuck am I watching.
It didn't feel
I do get that some of here and I do think that there is and this is a fault that I think the Marvel movies have when they're kind of in that phase 1 phase 2 where this one kind of feels like they get worried about staying in that heavy area for too long and so they feel like they have to get back to the fun and get back to the energy and you get that whiplash and let it simmer, let it now. At least I will say to this movie's credit, from there on I don't sometimes, especially in horror movies, I feel like the characters forget that their best friend died 2 minutes ago and it never kind of comes up again. And here, like the death of that character does sort of way over every scene that all of the characters have thereafter. You understand why maybe they're making more reckless decisions than they might normally, why they're making certain decisions, how some of the resolution happens. So I will give the movie both like, I'll both slap their hand for maybe giving us some of the emotional whiplash from it, but I'll still give them credit for never really completely distancing ourselves from the weight of that moment.
Well, and and that's really what I was alluding to earlier about the consequences that stick. I half suspected that the dad was going to like show up at the end of the movie and he was going to be like, oh, they took me to the hospital and they didn't think I was going to make it, but apparently I did, and everything was going to be okay. No, Dad's still dead and in the ground at the end of this film, and I think that's a bold choice to do that, especially in a movie. This movie is so geared towards kids. I think kids have a difficult time with death, and I don't know, maybe that's why George Lopez has turned up to 1,000, 2 seconds after the dad dies. But definitely props to the film for making this stick. Something else about that scene where the dad dies too that I thought was really powerful. It felt a lot to me like how ice raids have been described in like documentaries that we've seen, in reports, coming out of those things. It was actually a really disturbing scene, like a house full of docile people who aren't causing problems really for anybody, getting their door kicked in, having tear gas thrown in, being thrown to the ground. And it was really unsettling. And especially, again, in a kid's movie of all things, to have that portrayed that way, I thought was also a bold decision, but a very powerful moment.
Absolutely. You said jarring, and I think that's the or disturbing, and I think that's the right word for it, and intentionally so, there are other tense moments that happen sort of in the climax. And I do like the kind of like the action beats more so than I think I like the action beats at a lot of third acts, like punch 'em ups. But at the same time, that sort of end of act 2 raid on the house. Yeah, I mean, it hurts. It hurts not just because of what happened, but even what the characters went through before the heart attack happens. Seeing how Jaime is affected and kind of how helpless he is, just all of those things in unison together. Like, it was an incredibly, I would say one of the most effective overall, like, singular scenes in the film.
And look, I give the movie lots of props. Brad, you brought this up first, but I give the movie lots of props for sticking to its punches when the dad did succumb, right? It did kind of tip its hand a little early and said something about, that he had heart surgery or something. So you're like, watch out for this later. But when it does happen in a very tense moment, it sticks, right? It sticks. It's not like, oh, well, cut away from the scene where, we'll take a drone shot that hovers way up and fades out. And then 2 scenes later, the family will be all around him at the hospital and he's going to be okay, right? Like other movies would have done something like that, which it feels cheap. This movie, stuck to its guns, and for that, it was way more impactful, right?
And I think because of that, there are some moments in the third act where characters narrowly escape death. And that didn't feel cheap because I felt like the movie had sort of earned those, right? It showed us it wasn't afraid to pull its punches. So it didn't need to like punch us again. We were allowed to, we had a moment of great tragedy, so we can have some moments of great triumph afterwards, and it felt more earned.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Y'all mind if I call out another scene that was really disturbing and jarring to me?
Absolutely.
So there's a scene where Jaime is talking to Jenny at Jenny's childhood home, her dad's abandoned mansion, and they're like in her old room, and she's basically like letting all of her trauma out and expressing it to Jaime about her dad dying and, growing up feeling very lonely and like all this stuff. And the first thing Jaime does is go in and try to kiss her. And then they're interrupted. And apparently Jaime has a boner. Who gets a fucking boner from being trauma dumped on by a vulnerable, scared girl? That was really fucked up to me.
I don't.
I'm not laughing at
that
the
must
moment.
have just gone over my head.
At the exact, like, the wording you used.
Who gets a boner?
Yeah. Who gets a boner?
Who gets a boner after being trauma dumped on? Probably you know, kind of self-centered teenager, maybe.
Well, he's not even a
That's all I can
teenager.
think
He's
of.
like, I think we're meant to think that
He's like
he's like what,
Didn't
22.
he get out
22?
of Didn't he get out of college?
Yeah,
Just get out of
he at
college?
least
Yeah.
finished the first
Trauma
protocol.
boner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
D Geek Will.
Hey, Will.
And be sure to check out Will's YouTube channel. He's got some awesome stuff. But he says trauma boner, word of the day.
Hey, were you in the marching band in high school? Yeah, I played the tromboner. Yeah, I'm with you, Brad. Like, I think that I love a good romance in a movie. But I don't love it when it feels like it's shoehorned in there. And I don't think that this movie necessarily needed the Jenny Jaime relationship to develop the way that it did, because the relationship of this movie was Jaime and his family. So I think we got to see Jenny development in terms of her family, her relationship to her father, who has this legacy, her relationship to her aunt, who has sort of tarnished.
She's a Cord,
that.
right?
She's a Cord, yeah. So her
Yeah.
father is Ted Cord, the original Blue Beetle. Her aunt is Susan Sarandon, so they could have just focused on the family elements. Maybe you could have thrown a little bit of like maybe some light flirty like stuff back and forth to make you think like, maybe something will come of this. But I agree. Like, I think that wasn't needed in that scene. It didn't really add anything to either of those characters. I would rather have seen them continue talk about, like, you know, they both have a really interesting relationship to their father in that exact scene. So I wanted to see maybe just more of them just talking about their fathers.
So she was the niece or stepdaughter to Susan Sarandon's character.
Niece.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
yeah.
So by extension of the whatever.
Well, no, wait, no. Susan Sarandon played Victoria Cord. Wasn't she Ted Cord's wife?
Ted Cord's sister.
Is it Ted Cord's sister?
Yeah, because they talked a little bit about. She talked a little bit about how their father, like, she was next in line to get it.
Right.
She gave it
That's
to Ted,
right.
who was the
Okay.
younger one. Yeah. So it's her aunt.
So by extension, kind of. So she was an extension cord.
That's actually brilliant.
That's really good. You know, it's a bit of a run.
That was a lot of
It's a
setup
bit of a
for a little
runway to
payoff.
get there, but I feel like you landed it.
Yeah. I know it landed with Brad. I know he loves those puns.
I do. I'm a sucker for him for sure. So,
yeah.
One of the things that I liked about this movie, but also struggled with a little bit, was the lore of the Scarab. I don't know if either of you guys was curious about that. Will, you mentioned your exposure to the Blue Beetle character earlier. My introduction to him was in a 2008 episode of Smallville.
Oh, okay.
And that was the first time I'd ever even heard of Blue Beetle. And so, you know, I didn't really know a lot about the character. Was kind of excited for him to get his own movie so I could learn more about him. But I found myself wanting to know more about the Scarab itself. So the movie begins with us finding this Scarab in like this giant sphere of concrete or something, or alien machinery. I wasn't sure. We don't know how the Scarab got there, where the Scarab's from. I think at one point someone says that it's a world destroyer, and we see it in some like artwork, like going through a planet. But I kind of expected that, like, when Jaime and the Scarab like bonded, I thought maybe the AI voice would like, I know we hate exposition dumps, but I was hoping we would get like a montage or something explaining where the Scarab is from, or maybe drop bits of dialogue about it throughout the movie to kind of explain, because the movie also sets up that like the Scarab AI is into killing at first. So obviously, you know, it has a bad side. It has an arc of its own by the end of the movie. It's like, Jaime, we are not killers. I think that might have hit better for me if I had better understood the origins of the Scarab and how evil or not it is. I don't know.
Yeah. And I don't even.
Yeah, I don't.
Oh, go ahead, Jim.
Oh, sorry, Will. I don't dig any of that. Like, I guess there was a little bit, if I remember right, there was a little bit sprinkled at the beginning of the movie. I remember a big concrete sphere they were chunking at, right? Somebody like the Susan Sarandon character and her company were working on something, right? Trying to get this thing, and there was a few drops of information there, and it just kind of rolled off my head because I don't give a fuck. Like
Mm.
I just want to get into the story and the characters. You know me, I'm a character guy. Like I guess I didn't need. Some people want that, and the lore of the scarab and all that. Um, and you're right; it was very thin on that. I guess, just for me, I don't know. That might have been boring. I don't know. I really don't know. And by the way, I hate that AI voice stuff. I hated it. I hated like him talking to the suit. That's for me. That's cringy. That's very cringy. We can't do that right now, or whatever the Siri voice. You know, uh, your reserves are running low.
The
I don't
voice,
know. It's just stupid as fuck. I hate that
the
stuff.
voice.
Can
of
you
the
record? Can you record GPS directions for me in Waze using your impression of that voice, Jim? Because
I
that'd be
will. I
amazing.
will.
I'd love that too.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. So the voice on this was just because I love dumb trivia. The voice of the scarab, the what's that,
The suit?
Kajira,
Yeah.
was Becky G, who she's like predominantly known as a musician, but we also talked about her on this show 6 years ago. She was the Yellow Ranger in the Power Rangers movie. Yeah, just kind of going back to that. Well, not that that was like a memorable role that would step out, but yeah, she was the voice that. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm seeing here in chat. Like it looks like Matthew probably came across this character around the same time that you did through Smallville. D Geek Will through Young Justice. This is a character who, like I mentioned, has a relatively short publication history. He first premiered in 2006. They were doing, as DC does every few years, they were doing one of their Infinite Crisis like timeline reset things. And it was right around the time, Brad, I don't know if you remember the New 52 comics where they restarted everything. They restarted Blue Beetle there, and he was like Teen Titans and stuff like that. But my first exposure to the character was back in like the 80s and 90s. He was the Ted Kord character, who is sort of like a goofy version of Batman. Like, he's just like a rich guy who doesn't have any powers really. He just has a bunch of Beetle themed gadgets. So I just never ended up clicking in with the Jaime character because it just came later, right? So what I liked about this, all of that to say, I didn't know anything about the Scarab going into it, and I think again, there's a world where they find some neat ways to maybe montage some stuff about the Scarab, or maybe use some like I don't know, some like a moment where he's first possessed by a thing, and they switch to like a comic book style art style to show like other worlds being destroyed or whatever you want to do, right? But if you don't have something very stylized and interesting to do with it, then I would prefer the way they went, which is like go light on the lore, because what I don't want is like the thing that I hate in movies more than anything else is when the first line of the movie is long ago there was a like that style of exposition drop. So yeah, I could have gone either way on it, but this movie had so much family character stuff to play with that I was good, right? Like I the lore would have distracted there if there wasn't
Yeah, so I totally see where you're coming from, Brad, on that, because a lot of the movies do that. This being the first movie in what could be possibly a run of movies franchise. Who knows if it's going to be successful enough where they'll go back to that well again. But and this is a spoiler, and we're spoilers, so we can talk about it. In the mid-credits sequence, there is a chord. There's a voice, right, that comes from a machine in the lab or
Jason
something.
Sudeikis.
Right? So what is this? Ted Kord? Is that his name?
Ted Kord. Yeah.
Ted Kord. I assume it's him. I assume that would make the fans excited. And to me, a good chunk of the lore and description about the Scarab and its origins would be perfect for a movie that kind of brings him back, right? Because he was the original Blue Beetle, right?
Yes.
You guys are telling me. It seems to me like a lot of that stuff might fit into a second movie where they bring Ted Kord back. I don't know. Just my mind working on kind of what could be in the second movie. And I understand the argument. Well, don't give it to me in the second movie. Give me enough in the first movie to get me through that. But yeah, I could totally see them going and giving a lot of that exposition and lore about origins of the Blue Scarab in the next movie when they bring in Ted Kord.
Well, and they did intentionally leave some stuff open for that between not only the, like the mid credit scene, but even just sort of like setting it up in the film where they're just like, he's been missing. Like they never said like, oh, he died. Like, and whenever a character is missing in a thing, it's just like, oh, they're only missing because they haven't shown back up yet, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I would watch that. I would 100% watch that because, and here's my absolute dream movie, and this is going to mean nothing to most people, but fuck it. The Ted Kord Blue Beetle character was always like a buddy comedy with this like other character called Booster Gold. And so give me a world where Jason Sudeikis does come in and play Ted Kord, and give me Nathan Fillion as Booster Gold. I would watch that movie right now.
So
I sense trouble from Brad. Comedy.
Well, I mean, yeah. I did.
I know you like Nathan Fillion.
I do. I did read that the director really wants Jason Sudeikis to come in as Ted Kord, and in fact, we see like a painting or a portrait of the family in the old Kord house, and a lot of people online before the director gave that interview were like, "Oh my God, did you see Jason Sudeikis like in that painting?" I'd have to see the movie again, and I'm not going to watch this movie again. But maybe I can find a screenshot when it comes out. And I don't think I realized that the portrait looked like Jason Sudeikis, but I could see him being kind of a comical Blue Beetle. Speaking of comical Blue Beetles, I do have to say that the rubbery suit. Will, I don't know if you were aware of this when it was a thing in the late 90s, but it was giving me mad Big Bad Beetleborg vibes the whole movie. To the point that every time he's like running around on screen and those little arms are like wobbling around, I'm just like, Big Bad Beetleborgs. It was a Power Rangers spinoff-esque thing. Maybe it was inspired by Blue Beetle. I don't know. But the CGI in Big Bad Beetleborgs was better than the CGI flamingos at the Kord estate in this 2023 movie.
Those fucking flamingos. I think if I was a director, I would pull a George Lucas and just take them right out.
You mentioned Power Rangers.
Put alligators in it.
And I enjoyed the aesthetic of this a little more. But like when you're talking about like the suit having the rubbery parts moving, what my brain immediately goes towards is, remember any of the villain of the weeks that would show up on like the 90s Power Rangers?
Mm-hmm.
And they would run out and they were in just the cheapest, most rubbery,
Yep.
I could probably make that with a little bit of Warbler and like a couple of hours to get my I'm picturing that in my head, and now I'm trying to remember the way the tentacles look, and I think maybe because you said that, now I'm picturing them just like stupidly floppy.
They're not that bad, but they're moving. Yeah.
There's this serious scene, and I know we got to get to plugs. Yeah. But there's this serious scene where like, he's just reunited with his sister. The dad is dead, and he's finding out stuff about what happened. This is a very serious moment, and they're both serious faced, and the music is very serious, and the little like Parkinson arms are just like moving around, and I'm just like, I probably shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry, but like that, I don't know. Like it just really looked cheap and fake, and pulled me out of what otherwise was supposed to be a really impactful, deep moment.
It did look a little sketchy, but to be honest, I'm not even sure if I remember a scene where the arms were actually used. I guess there probably was a scene where he used the. I'm like, does he even need them? Like, I mean, why?
I know the first time we see them is when he goes up onto the ceiling and kind of like reverse like sticks into the ceiling.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember stuff like that. Although the thing that's
Yeah.
stuck in my head right now and is Jason Sudeikis really going to go from Ted Lasso to Ted Sudeikis? Is he just going to be stuck in the Tedverse?
You might be.
Yeah.
Ted Cord.
Yeah.
Maybe. You know what I'm stuck on? I'm stuck on Matthew's previous comment where he says something about first heard about him in Batman Brave and the Bold. I didn't know Batman had a soap opera. Like, is that like I didn't know there was a Batman soap opera. Did that happen?
It was an
The Brave and the
animated
Bold?
show. It
It
wasn't a soap
was,
opera.
Oh, it's
yeah,
not.
television
Oh, okay. I'm kidding.
series.
Yeah.
It
I
was a
think they had
joke.
a movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a
Yeah.
joke.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. As the world
Does
turns.
that not sound like?
Oh.
Does that not sound like a
It
soap
does.
opera?
It does.
And to be fair, if just to exonerate that part of it, before it was Batman the Brave and the Bold, I think the comic was just called The Brave and the Bold, and it really focused on like sort of like mini arc little stories, some of which could be a little soapy. So I remember there being one of them that was really focused on like Barbara Gordon and Dick Grayson, like will they, won't they type thing, you know? So
Yeah.
you know, so you're not wrong, Jim, is what I'm saying.
Okay. All right.
All right. Well, fellas, any final thoughts on Blue Beetle before we move on to some plugs?
No, that's the thing. It's like, you know, this is going to be one that I for a movie that I enjoyed. I also will say that, you know, to the movie's discredit, I don't know that this is going to be a movie that I'm going to think about a ton after this. You know, not in the way that certain other movies click with me, but for what it was, like for the 2 hours that I was with it, I enjoyed it. So take that for what it is.
Yeah, and I'd like to see some of these young actors like Zolo himself and the actress who played Milagro, Belissa Escobedo. I'd like to see them do other stuff. I mean, besides being the second Beetle movie, because I think, like I said, I think they did jump off the screen a little bit for me, and that's good. And yeah, I want to see them do more.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, fellas, for sharing your thoughts with the world at large. The world at large being, you know, the bear and bear adjacent people who tune into this podcast. We have another segment coming your way that we feel, you know, I don't know. We could end the show without, I guess, but plugs are such an integral part of what we do here.
Right. We don't want to get too far behind.
Yes.
Yeah, every time I think like you know, it's time to kind of pull out of the episode, I remember but plugs.
Right.
Butt plug,
Right.
yes.
Yeah. We don't want to be an ass by not
Right.
inserting these things into
Telling you about things.
our
yeah.
audience's purview. Okay, we've joked about butt plugs enough. I think you get the point. This is the part of the show where we tell you about things that we love in the hopes that maybe you'll discover them and love them too. Will, kick us off. What is your butt plug for this week?
Yeah, so this is another very blue-colored movie with questionable CGI. But it's The Last Voyage of the Demeter was out this last weekend, and it's pretty decent. This is a new film by Andre Overdal. He's given us a few things lately. Troll Hunter, and which is phenomenal. If you haven't seen Troll Hunter yet, go watch Troll Hunter. Autopsy of Jane Doe, really good horror movie from about 8 years ago. But
Wow, that far.
yeah, I know, right? I think we watched that at Fantastic Fest together, right?
Yeah. I think
So yeah, Last Voyage of the Demeter is basically there's a part in the Dracula story where he ships himself on this boat, Dracula, from Transylvania to England. And when you're reading the book itself, it just sort of says like, it goes through sort of the diary from the captain and just how like the character, like there are no survivors and, just like all this stuff. Right. Well, this movie is that. It's basically this confined crew on this boat dealing with the fact that Dracula has like stowed away on the ship and is slowly hunting them down and feeding through the course of the movie. What this movie does very well is it builds closed space tension, right? This feels a lot like, in that type of vein, like Alien or something like that, where the characters can't just like, you can't just say like, well, get in a car and drive away or get away from, because they can't leave this situation. Corey Hawkins, who we actually previously saw, he was in Straight Outta Compton. He played Dr. Dre in that. He's the lead in this. I think he's phenomenal in this. He's really good. Most compelling part of this movie, I think, is him. The overall feel of the ship itself, like they go through a tour of the ship at one point to sort of like set the geography of it. And for, boat scenes always feel super confined to me. Like, like it seems like if something happens, everyone would know about it, but you learn the geography, you learn why certain things are where they're at. And it feels of like a very lived in space. Dracula himself, like there are some questionable CGI moments in it, but whatever. Like the thing that worked for me is the tension and the way the characters and the plotting of the film build that tension. So I really liked it. It's the last voyage of the Demeter. It's another probably in that like 3.5 out of 5 star type role. But if you're kind of aching for some sort of like a horror type movie right now and you don't want to wait till Halloween, I think this is a good one to check out.
Well, thanks. I've heard about it. I kind of overlooked it though. So maybe we'll give it a look if we can still. I'm not sure it'll be out by the time we get a chance to see it, but thanks.
All right. Excellent. Will, thank you so much. Jim, what is your butt plug this week?
Mine's going to be very quick because I did plug this film previously, but I'm going to give it another plug because it just came out on VOD this week. It's called Past Lives. Probably my favorite. It could be my favorite movie of the year. Certainly one of my favorite movies of the year. This is a film written and directed by Celine Song, with a great performance. Great performances all around, but like a super performance by an actress named Greta Lee. It's out now on Vudu, I think, and Amazon Prime. Unfortunately, it's only one of the ones that you can buy for like $20. But look for it maybe to get into rental pretty soon. I don't know. With the award season starting to bear down on us, this could get some attention. So I don't know when it's going to be available for rent, but it is available for buy now on those two platforms. Man, this movie is great. It's a romantic drama, but I think it's fantastic. I loved it. It's called Past Lives.
Yeah, I gotta just say, like, absolutely, Jim. Like, I'm right there with you. This is my number one with a bullet of the year. Which there's been some other really good movies this year, but Past Lives is so fucking good. You're right. Like right now, it's available for on demand, so you can purchase it for like what, $19.99 or whatever, and it's worth it. It's worth it. This movie is so damn good. But I did see that it's going to move down to the rental costs September 5th or 6th or whatever that first week of September is.
Cool.
So I mean, worth the cost now, but if you're not quite there yet, very soon you'll be able to like just straight up rent it too. And again, it's fantastic.
Cool.
All right. Excellent. I've heard such good buzz about that one. I regret not seeing it with you, Jim. I think I was playing D&D when you went to go see that movie in the theater. So maybe I'll catch it.
But to be fair, it's one of those ones that like snuck up on me and caught me by surprise.
Yeah.
So
which means
didn't have a lot of fanfare.
Which means it's probably one of the best movies there is, because we all know that when that happens to you, it's usually a good sign. So cool. All right. For me this week, I am going to go to the television well that I so often visit when it comes to plugs. A new Disney Plus series premiered this week, relative, of course, to when we're recording this episode. If you're listening 10 years from now, well, the show came out 10 years ago, and you probably already know all about it. But this show is actually a live action continuation of a CGI animated series that I really, really loved from the late 2010s called Star Wars Rebels. Cool band of characters in that show. Takes place a few years before A New Hope. And I was really bummed when that series came to an end. I loved those characters so much, including a character that they brought over from Star Wars: The Clone Wars, Ahsoka Tano. She plays a big role in Rebels. Spoilers, I guess, for that. But she has her own show now called, apropos, Ahsoka. And I got an opportunity to watch the first couple episodes. They dropped two the first week, and it's it's a little slow going to start. I think it's trying to introduce a lot of people to Ahsoka. We saw her briefly in The Mandalorian. So this isn't the first time we've seen the live action version of Ahsoka, but not a lot of people are super familiar with her history and the fact that she was Anakin's Padawan once upon a time. And she has her own history with Darth Vader. And anyway, really, really cool to see characters from Rebels brought to life in live action. Sabine Wren is one of my favorite Star Wars characters ever, and she's played incredibly well on the show. Um, Again, a bit of a slow start, but man, I'm so excited to have this show. I'm ready to see it kind of slowly, unfurl. It's Uncharted-esque, Tomb Raider-esque, mystery box-esque adventure. So if you haven't yet had an opportunity to see the first couple episodes of Ahsoka, it's really good. Check it out on Disney Plus. But do yourself a favor. Maybe I understand not wanting to watch the Clone Wars and Rebels, which both went on for 5+ years. That's a lot to catch up on. But maybe find a good recap video about Ahsoka to learn about her history before you watch the show. Might give you a little bit of a leg up.
Very good. I know that I've seen some of the Star Wars Rebels with you, and I know how excited you were for this series. I only caught 10 seconds of it, but what I saw looked pretty good.
Yeah, Rosario Dawson plays Ahsoka, and I love her to death, and she does such an amazing job. She's not the original voice actor for Ahsoka, but she plays an adult version of her in this, and she's fantastic. So, yeah, Jim, I'm sure you'll see me watching this show over the next 8 weeks.
I'll see more of it. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, listen, everybody, thanks so much for hanging out with us. We are coming at you next week with a review of 2013's Old Boy. Unfortunately, it is not available for streaming right now, but there is a 4K remaster. Did I say 13? I meant 2003. Thanks, Will. But there is a 4K remaster out right now. It's in movie theaters. Again, you can't stream it, but you have an opportunity to go see this. I think we're gonna get tickets and go see it tomorrow night, and then we'll celebrate this iconic film on next week's episode, and then we're gonna take a couple weeks off. Just a heads up on that. Jim and I are headed to Hawaii for a 10-day vacation that kind of spans both of the Tuesdays that we would normally record. Will, you probably have 1,000 things going on too.
I've got that trip I'll be in
Yep.
Denver, Colorado. So yeah,
There
we're traveling. Yeah.
Yep. So just kind of be aware that after next week we're going to be off for a couple weeks. But listen, in case anyone wants to chat movies with us between now and next week, or while we're away in Denver and Hawaii and wherever else, let's talk about how folks can connect with us online. Jim, where can folks plug into you?
You can find me on the Letterboxd platform where I, rate all the movies and all the stuff I watched at JJP Out West, at JJP Out West. And you can also find me on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico.
All right. Thank you so much. Will, how about you?
Let's see. So you can check out Instagram. You can check out Letterboxd. You can check out Blue Sky, which I'm preferring to the Bird app these days. And you can check out TikTok, all under some variation of @themoviebear. You can also see me on Facebook. I'm William Lindis there. Just my name. I'm just William Lindis. I enjoy being on all of those platforms. Come whichever, if you want to see pictures, if you want to talk about movies, if you want to see me talk about just random bullshit in my day on Facebook, whatever it is, find me on the appropriate platform and send an invite.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Will. Folks, you can find me on Facebook. I probably have lots of chubby bearded dudes who are friends with you in common, or skinny bearded dudes, or skinny not bearded dudes, or chubby not bearded dudes, or women, or all kinds of people. I love people. Just please make sure I know you're a people and not a bot, by sending me a message first, please. I may ask you to do some math equations to prove your humanity, because I got tricked, guys. I got tricked by a hairy-chested bot, and I can't believe I fell for it. But I guess it can happen to anybody. So I'm upping my security when it comes to friend requests.
Also, recently Brad's revealed that one of his kinks is algebra. So, if he makes you do math, it's mutually beneficial.
Yeah, isolate that variable, boy. Fuck yeah.
Yeah, solve for X. Solve for X.
Oh, goodness. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. Love and adoration to all of you, Matthew and Will and everybody else who is hanging out with us in the live chat this week. Anthony, so great to see y'all, and definitely come back next week. Make sure that you check out Old Boy. I hear the 4K remaster is pretty fucking amazing, and we'll talk all about it on episode 485. Take care, everybody. See you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.